Hello, my name is Haley Holloway. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a reference and instruction librarian at the Library and Archives at the University of Baltimore. And I'm really excited to be sharing my literature review for the MILEX Award as a runner-up about critical information literacy. I'm sorry to not be able to join everybody today in person, but I am currently in Connecticut to celebrate my sister for her baby shower. So I thought I had a pretty good reason to not be able to join you in person. But to go over a quick overview of my literature review, again, I researched critical information literacy. So the main sections of my review were how to define and various definitions for critical information literacy, the applications of the framework, and some critiques and potentially also some barriers to implementation and usage of it. So going and looking at the definitions of critical information literacy, there was definitely some differences in how different researchers kind of approached the topic as a framework. A few different kind of approaches to it, or even sections of the same definition, which I have here from Trubinsky and Toole, different sections of their one full definition, but some different areas of it that I think are important to sort of pull apart and focus on. The theoretical definition of it. It is a theory and practice that considers the socio-political dimensions of information and production of knowledge and critiques the ways in which systems of power shape the creation, distribution, and reception of information. Critical information literacy can also be defined as sort of an action-based framework. Again, from Dubinsky and Toole, that libraries as catalysts for social change. So again, sort of that action-based part of the definition. And a really important, I think, emphasis that should be put on any definition of critical information literacy is that libraries are not and cannot be neutral actors. And critical information literacy also has some related terms. So if you see critical librarianship or critical pedagogy, research also, I think, covers very similar principles and practices that are just by these slightly different names than critical information literacy. To jump into some of the applications of critical information literacy, there is so many applications of this framework. I think expanding my review potentially got away from me a little bit too much upon reflecting and looking back at my review to prepare for this presentation. But there are so many applications for it, both for librarians, for teaching librarians specifically, and for faculty in other areas as well. But again, I am approaching my review from a academic librarian perspective. I am a teaching librarian, so looking into critical information literacy was very interesting and appealing to me. So one of the sort of areas that my review covers for applications of critical information literacy are partnerships between faculty at their institution and librarians. So whether the librarian themselves are a faculty status or a staff status, it is sort of between librarians and teaching faculty in other subject areas. So one example from Patterson and Gamso looked at the portrayals of women in Shakespeare and also in comics using a critical information literacy lens. Additionally, the librarians at the California State University established the Critical Information Literacy Leadership Institute in order to train faculty at their institution on the principles of critical information literacy and to really encourage the buy-in of this framework to establish their own teaching principles in critical information literacy. These partnerships can also be, well, the applications can also happen in librarian and librarian partnerships. A really interesting study or paper was about creating communities of practice between data and technical librarians and teaching librarians. So seeing a lot of the kind of synergies between these different departments of how to really take advantage of our collections and to really share those with, various constituents on our campuses was a great paper. And also educating future librarians. So RapCheck discussed, training and teaching current library and information science students who will be, entering the field on these principles and how they can apply that to their own future practice. There's also a good number of applications that are more theoretical. So, looking at critical information literacy and anti-colonialism was the focus of Marsh's paper, and also using, again, critical information literacy for information activism from Cuevas and Severo et al. Um, where more, again, kind of theoretical applications seem sort of like they conflict with each other, but um, again, sort of not exactly more thought-based applications and uses of critical information literacy. Another big section of my literature review was looking at the critiques of critical information literacy. These are a combination of, some of my big takeaways, so I don't have quite as many um, citations as I did on this first slide. But a big one that I definitely found was the conflation of critical information literacy with other teaching philosophies and frameworks. I think it could definitely be a very interesting conversation of how different and similar critical librarianship is to critical information literacy. Is critical information literacy itself necessary if critical librarianship is a larger sort of philosophical framework that librarians are using in their own practices? Um, Also, documenting principles of critical information literacy in the current political climate is definitely a challenge to implementing critical information literacy. A lot of librarians and other folks in various arenas are having a lot of challenges in documenting principles of DEI and other ideas and thoughts and frameworks into their own teaching. So, kind of the problem with formalizing more of the principles of critical information literacy can be a barrier to a lot of those folks, and they're not legally allowed to name specifically what they're doing, what their values are. Um, Additionally, buy-in and adoption from both librarians and institutions can occur on different levels. I've found from my research, and I can definitely um, can attest to this from my own personal experience as a librarian. Sometimes, big ideas or ideas about making changes or implementing different things can be challenging to really establish formally at an institution, especially if you become kind of the person known for a thing. Um, can sometimes dissuade other librarians from incorporating principles of critical information literacy into their own practice if they see another person who is much more visibly, verbally advocating for it and using it. Um, Kind of the documenting and establishing formal practice for critical information literacy is kind of connected to the second bullet point, that a lot of critical information literacy practices are kind of at the individual level a lot of times, not always. Or maybe a certain department might be really interested in it and establishing it. But there is not as often that formal kind of adoption of it, whether that's in, our library policies or our institutional policies, our other academic policies. So going back to um, a future slide of we're not able to be neutral actors, that can be really challenging to, let other people know that if we're not able to really establish that formally. And then also the investment in critical information literacy. I do mean investment by, money and time. Again, if, we're not really incorporating this formally into our practice and our, job expectations and things like that, it can be really easy to get away from a lot of the values of critical information literacy, and analyzing our own teaching practices. Format of instruction can also be really challenging for implementing critical information literacy. I come from an institution that I do feel very lucky to be able to teach a credit-bearing information literacy course. So I'm able to dive much more deeply into a lot of topics that I know a lot of librarians can have more challenge, expressing or covering during one shots. If you have 1 hour with a group of students at a semester, it can be really hard to really jump deeply into a lot of the principles and topics and ideas that are really crucial to understanding critical information literacy and being able to share those skills and ideas with students. So again, a lot of these barriers and critiques can all really tie together. In conclusion, I think that the framework, or the idea of critical information literacy as a framework, it can be very flexible. Through my research, I saw so many really different applications, different contexts, whether that's directly with students, educating other faculty, or even relationships between librarians. There are so many applications and uses of it, but that flexibility can be both a plus and a minus. I think being able to have something that can be very widely used can be really great, but it can also be a minus in that it can sort of, the ideas of the real values of what critical information literacy is can definitely become very muddied. So that can, again, pose challenges to using the framework. It is a framework that I think it has very good intentions at face value. A movement, a personal, ethical, or philosophical idea in wanting to really impart students with skills to be critical about the information that they see and to second guess, dig deeper, um, is a great idea, but it definitely has that imperfect implementation and application. And I just want to also leave or finish up with a quote too that I did really like from my research as well, in that critical information literacy is not about actionable solutions, but a call to action for experimentation that unsettles information literacy. So looking at information literacy from a more traditional standpoint or traditional librarianship, really taking those principles and ideas and practices, looking at them closely, analyzing them critically in order to really know that we are giving our students the skills that they need to parse through the enormous amount of information that they see every day, whether that's in a academic context or in service learning in their careers in the future. And that can, yeah, again, kind of like unsettling information literacy. I think it can be important. So that is kind of my research in a nutshell. I did not cover everything. Here's some references for some of the specifics that I mentioned from my literature review. But thank you all for listening to my recording, and I think I should hopefully be live to answer some questions.